So with a focus now on banking, let's reintroduce Jim Rogers, CEO of Rogers Holdings, who is joining us from Singapore. And let's welcome Vince Farrell, CIO of Soleil Securities Group, joining us from New York. Thank you both for joining us. Now, Jim, just to start with you, let's talk about regulation. The banks that were too big to fail a year ago are now even bigger. What has actually been accomplished in terms of regulation, and what do you think still needs to be accomplished?
Well, first of all, this whole problem was not caused by Lehman Brothers or Lehman Brothers' failure. Lehman Brothers didn't call AIG to fail, or Fannie Mae to fail, or Freddie Mac to fail, or Iceland to fail. A lot of people have been failing here in the last year or two or three. Lehman Brothers was an effect, not a cause that was going on. The real problem, Julia, over the past 10, 15 years has been that the regulators have not let anybody fail. They have pulled in crony capitalism. Every time somebody got into trouble, they would call up Mr. Greenspan or Mr. Bernanke and say, "Save me." And they would save them. They would prop people up. Had they let people fail, we would have solved this problem long ago. They refused to let the market do what the market's supposed to do. They've propped everybody up. There's been huge failure of regulation. Even when they were supposed to do something, such as with Mr. Madoff, they didn't know what they were doing. These guys said, well, I don't know why they're not in jail.
So Vince, I want to hear if you agree with Jim on this. Do you think the regulators needed to let more banks fail, or do you think we need stricter regulations?
Well, Julia, I agree with Jim, and I think I heard the segment before this. If you roll it back to long-term capital at the end of the 1990s, when this the potential for huge failure first presented itself, we should have acted then. Regulations are actually on the books. They're just not enforced. I wonder if I could jump ahead for just a sec. It is what it is right now, and I think very clearly the regulators are ineffective and that governments are not going to let banks fail. One way out of this morass is to make the investment bankers that dream up all this toxic stuff get paid in the stuff they create. The idea of, gee, we just had a great quarter because we shoveled a lot of this stuff out of the door. We're going to give you a lot of cash. Why don't you give them a lot of the paper they just created? I have a feeling if your own self-interest is on the line, you might be a little bit careful about what you create.
Jim, Vince was talking about the toxic assets still on the books, potentially, of a lot of these banks. I understand that actually there's been balance sheet increasing. They've taken a load of real economy companies, which they refuse to write down to market levels. When and if are we going to see this happen? Surely that is what needs to happen, that we see real write-downs and we see real valuations of the banks, which, let's face it, we all own a slice of now.
Well, you could also get rid of some of them by giving them out as bonuses to the bankers. They keep giving themselves bonuses, but they give themselves bonuses in real money, cash. Why don't they just give out the toxic waste? Most of the toxic waste came from the bankers in the first place. Let them have it. And let the regulators have some of it. Let the regulators pay themselves in toxic waste. They're the ones who approved all of this. Alan Greenspan for years kept saying, this is good. This is good that's happening.
But surely bonuses, it's a red herring. If you don't pay bankers money to do the job they're doing, they're just going to go out of the investment banks. They're going to go to boutiques. They're going to go to hedge funds. And we're going to lose track of some of these investments if we don't keep it in the more regulated area.
Wait, Ross, that's the way the world is supposed to work. When people fail, new bankers rise and take over. In my lifetime on Wall Street, at least 20 or 30 banks have failed. You don't remember Goodbody. You don't remember Reynolds and Company. You don't remember Kidder Peabody. But they all failed, and dozens more. The world survived. New bankers start, they rise up. They build up new great investment banking firms. Goldman Sachs started in the 20s when everybody else was failing. I mean, come on. This has been going on for years. Who cares if some bankers disappear? It's not the end of the world. Turn in their Lamborghinis and start driving taxis.
If we want to know what this toxic stuff is worth, tell the bankers to figure out what it's worth today, pay themselves that in bonus. Because you can believe that they'll undercut the value, but whatever value they get to is going to be what it ought to be valued at, and then you'll start to clear this bad stuff off the balance sheets and get back to a more normal state.
Gentlemen, it's more, if I can just jump in. Vince, if the argument a year ago was that some of these banks were too big to fail and hence needed government intervention and help, with some of the mergers and deals that have been done to save the smaller players in the industry, are they even bigger now?
I'm afraid they're not only bigger, more, but they're more convoluted. And we've also gotten so scared of letting our children go out on the sidewalk to play. We've overcompensated and just say, oh my gosh, we just can't let anybody fail. But I think Jim has very articulately pointed out this is what capitalism is about. You have the right to succeed, but you also have the obligation to fail when you don't do a good enough job. And if you have a couple of failures, I think Warren Buffett put it very well. Nobody set out to be a thief. Nobody set out to be bad. But if you let a couple of white-collar criminals hang in the wind, the rest of us are going to get the religion very, very fast. And the fact is, that's the way to clear out the system. It just periodically happens. And to try and overly protect your children and not let them grow up and go out on the street is not a recipe for success.
Vince, I take your point. It's Ross here. Are we in a fit enough state to suddenly face up to, as you say, really mark everything at the right price? Are we capable of taking that right now, sentimentally?
Ross, that's such a good question, and we'll never know if we're right. Is it the right time to go walking outside? You'll always be able to second guess and come up with an excuse for why now is not the time. Actually, now is probably the best time, because we've shored up some of these institutions. They actually are building up book value in some cases. As far as the stock prices go, many of the stocks, the financial stocks, are trading below tangible book value. So the market is saying that the stuff they have on the balance sheets is not worth anything. So now's as good a time as any. And I think you just simply have to decide what course of action you're going to take. What's the end game? What do we want to get to? We want to get to a more transparent, clear situation. And you'll always find a reason not to act. It's kind of like a lawyer or an accountant. There's always a reason to say no. Well, you're just going to have to pick a point in time and say yes, especially now that it's just, the longer we go, the harder it is to kind of get it straight, because we'll just keep making excuses. This should have been done a while ago. It's past due.
Ross, if you're not going to do it today, when are you going to do it? They wouldn't do it in 1994. They wouldn't do it in 1998. They wouldn't do it in 2001. When are you going to do it? 2026? We're going to have zombie capitalism for the next 10, 15 years. The Dow Jones is below where it was 11 years ago because they keep propping people up. How long are you going to let the bureaucrats run the thing so that we don't have a good, clean, vibrant system?
I don't disagree. I just want to make sure that when we do it, we're not going to have a heart attack, right? Die. That's all I care about.
Look, you can put a Band-Aid, you can give aspirin to a cancer patient and make him feel better for a while. That's not going to solve his problem. You've got to take more drastic action than that.
Okay, Jim, Vince, stick around. We've got plenty more chat to come from you and Steve as well, of course.